Hey, everybody, this is Justin and Greg. We are back again. We have a little bit of a special edition podcast. We'll be interviewing Michael Finney of the 1893 Chicago's Columbian Exposition project. He wrote an awesome book that you can find on Amazon, as well as a documentary that you can rent and purchase on Amazon. So we're going to be talking about the Chicago World's Fair of 1893. We'll be jumping into some of the topics about the buildings that were there that are still around, some of the features that were there that drew people in, and a little bit of everything in between. So, Michael, thank you very much for coming on Baseball and Whatever. We greatly appreciate it.
I got to say, I think Michael's still on mute right here, but Justin, I think this is by far the most intelligent conversation we have had on Baseball and Whatever.
Yes.
So we are stepping outside our comfort zone a little bit on this one, but it's super exciting to bring some intelligence to this podcast, I must say. So, I know I can't bring it, unfortunately, so I will do my best here, guys. But Michael, it is great to have you, man. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I like Chicago sports too. Lifelong White Sox fan.
All right, me too.
Yeah, well, you gotta be feeling good with the way the team's playing right now, right? I mean, at least they're in the first place for the division still, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, no complaints. And, unfortunately, the Cubs were dismantled last week.
Oh,
so that's a drag for their fans. But, hey, we benefited. Can't complain.
Exactly. It's, I feel like it's cyclical, right? The Sox had, 05, then the Cubs had the next decade, and now it's swinging back to the Sox. So everyone deserves their time to shine a little bit. But I guess just to kind of start us off, I mean, in terms of what we're going to be talking about, do you want to just give us a little brief rundown of just kind of how the Chicago World's Fair, the Columbian Exposition came to a head, just for our listeners, and kind of just in case they're unfamiliar with the topic itself?
Sure. Yeah. So in the 19th century, there were these events, World's Fair events, these huge gatherings that started to get organized. There was one in London and New York and Paris. And eventually, they were looking for a site for 1893 to commemorate Columbus's, 1892. So it was actually a year late to commemorate Columbus. And, the bid was kind of like coming down to Chicago and New York. Chicago made a really strong case for it and won it. Mm-hmm. And then, that was the first one in the city.
That it kind of harkens back to, I remember being I think I would have been in college at this point when Chicago was down to the final for the Olympics. And then just, that sudden depression when they were the first ones eliminated. But I did not realize it was down to New York and Chicago. That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. I would say it's comparable to that experience.
Yeah.
Everybody was looking for that event to come to the city. And unfortunately it didn't pan out.
Right.
I don't know about you guys, but I kind of remember where I was when Chicago got eliminated from the running. I was actually, I think I was heading to work, and I was leaving my, I think I was leaving a college class or something. I just happened to see it on the TV before I had to leave for work. I'm like, oh, well, that was fast.
Yeah, so. that ended very quickly. Yeah, so
it's anticlimactic.
That's exactly what it was.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Well, Michael, you're obviously very passionate, very knowledgeable about this. So what can I ask? What drew you to this? What drew you to this topic?
So basically, it's something that I think people from around Chicago are generally familiar with, as you are kind of growing up around the city or traveling around and seeing landmarks that are left over or that mention this event. And for me, I suppose the beachhead, for this particular project is getting an antique book that was full of photographs of the event. Mm-hmm. And I started to share those pictures on Twitter day after day. So in 2018, I shared about 125 photos over the last 125 days of the year, which would have been the 125th anniversary of the event. Mm-hmm. Through that time, I learned a lot, and I was kind of looking at it as this collection of content and thinking, what else could I do with this over time? And, I started to gather it up and edit the copy that I had and look at the photos and see if there were themes that I could derive from what I had posted And if there were any gaps and stuff like that I could fill in with other information or just do some research. So I ended up going out and taking some photos from around the city and, kind of finding out that there was, an architectural legacy that lives on through the Art Institute and the Museum of Science and Industry. Amongst other artifacts, statues and things like that. I'm sure people are familiar with hearing about some of those things coming down, in fact, over the last year.
Wow. Obviously I know, and I know you've mentioned that in other interviews too, where it started as tweets, like you just said, and then it kind of snowballed from there. I know I'm probably not the only one, but you kind of always have those aspirations. You're like, man, it would be so interesting and so exciting to write your own book someday. Was there ever any time where it just felt overwhelming? Like, oh man, like I bit off more than I can chew, or the scope of this is getting too big for me? Or was it really just a pretty enjoyable process from start to finish?
I would say pretty enjoyable. For me, I like working with content and have been doing it for a long time, since I was a teenager, making music and things like that. So, creating an album or creating a book, kind of looked like the same things to me. And editing through and doing the writing and laying out the book itself, it was a lot of work. And you kind of, I wouldn't say, bit off more than I can chew, so much as, do I want to continue diving down into different rabbit holes to find things to include, or do I need to kind of like cap it off here? And I would say, that was probably the case with the book, because while I was writing that, it was kind of becoming evident that there were other things that I could do with this content, such as turn it into a documentary. So at some point I had to say, all right, I need to wrap up this book so that I can think about doing some other stuff. And, that's basically the path that I've gone down with that one. It's been pretty natural. I would say that they all kind of, each release or component of the project kind of insists on other things that could happen, or it builds on work that has already been done, such as just cataloging all the images, writing the editorial, and understanding, that I have these kind of like silos, these themes, these topics that I can drill down into and, cycle into new concepts, I would say.
That's wow. I'm having nightmares back to my undergrad, having to go to different daily. I think there's a Chicago archival site near one of the daily colleges on the south side. And I remember I was doing my report on the Democratic primary riots.
Oh, okay.
And I remember having to dig through all the boxes. So I can't even imagine digging through, memorabilia and photos. And I mean, obviously it came out so well, and it was, you did such a great job putting it all together. It's just fascinating how,
Appreciate that.
you can just accomplish everything like that. That's great stuff.
Well, I think anybody can, if you want to invest the time.
Sure.
I don't know that everybody is technically skilled today, but I think that they can do those things if they kind of like pace themselves and don't necessarily get lost in any one particular detail or component, and just and eventually you have to say like, okay, this is done, So in the documentary, if you've watched that, there are more things in the documentary than there are in the book. So, so there are more photos in there. There's some video that I shot. There are more little pieces and points that I included in there that were not in the book, because I continue to learn more. And also I get new artifacts, and I kind of utilize those things as I continue to move forward. With everything.
Wow.
So, Michael, I want to ask, throughout all of this research you've done, is there something you have found the most fascinating in all your in all your research or all your studies? Is there just like that one thing that really made you go, wow?
Geez, that is really tough to say. There's a lot of things that you
I'm sure there's plenty.
Yeah.
So, I really like some of the food elements. I always like the idea that, we are having an experience that, though obviously ingredients and processes change a little bit, I think that the idea is to try and retain, whatever that experience was. I think they at least resemble those experiences, or that experience translates across time, where, you could have a Pabst Blue Ribbon and that was at the event. You could have a Vienna beef hot dog and that was at the event. Wrigley Juicy Fruit gum introduced at the event. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So yeah, so like these sorts of things, that kind of thing, like the food aspect, I think, is the piece that really lets people time travel the easiest.
Wow. I didn't realize some of those brands and some of those things were, available for the first time back then. That's crazy to think of. Just, man, time just keeps on moving, whether you're ready or not,
Right.
What about in terms of, the events being planned and it's all set for 1893, what types of stuff, obviously I know you mentioned some of the food and some of the brands that would be there, but what other types of things were being highlighted and promoted to the public to kind of get them to engage and want them to attend?
Okay. So I would say that there are maybe a couple of really big aspects to the event, which is the international presence, and then also the presence of all of the states and territories across the United States, and the displays that a lot of these states and countries did. So a lot of nations contributed art. A lot of states would bring representative components of their industry and commodities and agriculture and things like that. So California, was huge there. Illinois obviously was massive. They had a just incredible building, very expensive for the time, but also, just a highlight of what Chicago was about and what Illinois was about. Indiana had a presence there. All of the Midwest did. In many countries made a huge architectural statement or artistic contribution to the event. And many of them operated concession stands. I would say that there were, just endless attractions. All kinds of historical things were brought in from around the world. There were all kinds of national kind of cultural experiences. And some of those, obviously, for the time, you look back at that and you say, this isn't really authentic. This is kind of like a show or whatever. Sure. And, that I think kind of just goes with the time. It's hard to like sit and be like, oh, we're going to criticize this now. It's like, obviously like stuff is faked or whatever, or it's just like overblown. But, again, technical achievements, there were all kinds of industrial and commercial offerings that were on display. You have the Ferris wheel, which was debuted at this event, which at the time, the reason why the Ferris wheel was created was to compete with Eiffel's Tower, right? That was at the Paris exhibition 4 years earlier.
Oh, okay.
So if that hadn't been devised, there was actually they had petitioned Eiffel to build a tower in Chicago.
Wow. Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So like that didn't happen. They ended up going with the Ferris wheel, and Chicago still has a Ferris wheel downtown to this day. So there's something to be said for that.
Gosh, I'm trying to imagine, Navy Pier having a giant Eiffel Tower on it, on the tip of it.
Oh, really?
It would have been down on the south side by Museum Science and Industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be a different look for the skyline. I'm this is probably, a reductive response, but I'm almost imagining like a very early version of like Epcot's tour of the countries, when you can kind of go around it, in the back of it and get all the different foods. And, you're getting this a little bit of an Americanized version of what, people envision these countries to be and things like that. But just back then and obviously, trying to drive people.
These countries were they staged these presences.
Okay.
Actually. So it was, the pavilions and everything that they created in the buildings, they were created by architects from those countries, and in some cases built in those countries and shipped to Chicago and reconstructed on site.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, exactly. So, when I say that some aspects were falsified, there were some investors who invested in things to be present at the fair, and they wanted to create an aesthetic. So is the street of Cairo that was present at the World's Fair, was that 100% authentic to a street in Cairo? No, I mean,
No,
obviously,
right.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
But as far as like creating this very immersive experience for guests at the World's Fair, the Columbian Exposition, it was a very popular attraction.
Mhm.
So in that sense, like, I mean, I also don't go to Chuck E. Cheese and think it's like a real rat in that sense. So you have to suspend some things.
Especially since world travel isn't what it is today, obviously,
Right.
So, different cultures, different worlds almost were very, jarring and glaring and just new to people. So that must have been quite the experience. Michael, how much time was needed to prepare for the fair and like maybe just construct all the buildings and everything? Like,
right.
what was the time frame for all of that?
So Jackson Park was prepared, including all of the landscaping and the canal digging and everything. They were pretty set on like 18 months, 2 years. Some of that stuff was, so there was like a soft opening in 1892, like the fair. So there are some photos where you can see some places, and there, it wasn't completely finished. There's some like wooden temporary stuff that's in place and some photos that were taken in late 1892, but the official opening was in early 1893. Right.
Yes. Right. Wow. I mean, obviously, I know we've talked a little bit about the Ferris wheel, and I know, obviously, the allure, I guess, of electricity being there and showing people how that works. In your research, did you come across anything about how that had an impact on people wanting to come see it? Were they kind of shocked by what this new, I don't want to call it an invention, but this new resource could, how that could change their lives? Or was it more of a novelty for them or
it was absolutely a novelty at that point in time. This was the first big display of electric light that most people had seen at that point in time. Obviously it had existed and it had been getting installed internationally. So there were many sites around the world that had electricity and electric light in them being used. Many people did not have that. You're talking about the era of candles and, lamp oil and stuff like that.
Right.
And here's electric light, just like completely making this place viable into the later hours in a way that no one had ever seen before. And that, I think, is documented pretty well. The kind of the battle between Edison and Tesla's alternating and direct current wars. If you've watched the Current War, I think it's called the Current War. That's really good with Benedict Cumberbatch. I recommend that one.
Oh, nice. Okay, I'll have to give that a look.
Yeah, it's not too old. It's only a few years old at this point.
Oh, that's that sounds intriguing now. So he's a fantastic actor. So
yeah, there's other good actors in there too. I don't remember exactly who or the names of them, but the cast is solid. Yeah, there's other people that you will recognize. I just always kind of remember him as Edison.
Right.
He's so conniving in that movie.
Michael, any kind of obviously there are a lot of exhibits. Is there one or two you'd like to touch on that we should give mention to while we're talking about it? Exhibit presentations for the that were made for the public to see.
Yeah, I think there's one kind of interesting one, which is called the Battleship Illinois. So this was a fake battleship that they built on Lake Michigan from the floor of the lake up, and people could go in it and kind of tour it. And and it was massive. It's huge. That I think is kind of cool, and it's interesting. The reason why there's a fake battleship is because there was a treaty that was agreed on between Canada and the United States that no ships that would be, like armed for war would be on the Great Lakes.
Oh, wow.
So they built this fake one there instead. I think that one's pretty cool. I would say this is not officially inside of the event, but right outside was the Wild West show. That one was popular too. So There's a lot of great stuff from that. Obviously, anybody who's read Devil in the White City is going to be familiar with like H.H. Holmes and the work that he was doing down the street.
Yeah, exactly.
And, I hope that gets turned into a show or a documentary or whatever they're supposed to be doing with that. That would be fantastic to see at some point.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard, gosh, it's going probably on a decade now. There's always these small rumors that come out of, was it Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio trying to do something with it? And then I don't know if that faded or, something fell through, but I would love to see, their take on it, their spin on it. Did you, not to jump ahead, but in terms of Devil in the White City, did you enjoy that book? Did you find it okay. That's, I kind of assumed.
I like it as a book. Yeah. I think it's solid in that sense. I think in how accurate, everything totally is in terms of like, the speculation that he does regarding H.H. Holmes, that it's impossible to confirm some of those things, and he's just kind of like connecting dots with what documentation or speculation, that he can do and has there too. Sure. But it is fun. Absolutely. Yeah. It was a great read and it would be great to see it on screen.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I can't even imagine where they could go with some of the gruesome details or, supposed details of what some of those people experienced with him. Yikes. Oof, boy.
Right.
Go ahead, Greg. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, John. I just wanted to ask, so when it was kind of all said and done and was over, did it have any, like, what were the lasting, like, results or repercussions for the city of Chicago? Like, were there any positives that came from the fair, any negatives for the city? Anything you can touch on in that aspect?
I would say all positive. This event put Chicago on the map after the Great Fire, right? So the city had been burnt down. It in a sense, that fire allowed this event to not necessarily happen, but the work that architects were doing in the city limits after that fire was notable because they had this canvas to create on top of the city, which gives rise to John Root and Daniel Burnham, their partnership in Chicago. And they had just a great new canvas to work their structures into or throughout Chicago because of the fire. So they had 20 years between that fire and when the event was to kind of build their legacy and the Chicago name regarding architecture and to make a good example and, ultimately to be able to attract investment and the committee to decide to bring the event to Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Wow. In terms of, and I know you've touched on this a little bit, but in terms of obviously, you have the book, you have the documentary. In terms of kind of the creative aspect, what did you find more exciting to work on? Was there one that you kind of enjoyed more than the other, or was it pretty much a level playing field in that regard?
Okay, so in many ways, I really look at them as like this linear development. The book is the script for the documentary, right? Okay. So in many ways, I had to make some adjustments. So when I was reading the book for the audiobook version, I knew doing that I was going to use that as the voiceover. And I knew that some of those things weren't going to translate and that I was going to fill in some other gaps. Because even as I was getting to that, I had put the book out in August of 2019. By the time I got the audiobook out in January of 2020, I had already learned more stuff and gone out and, connected more dots and stuff like that. So I knew that I wanted to include a few more things into the documentary, but I couldn't put those things into the audiobook because it wouldn't be a one-to-one conversion of the book to the audiobook. So in that sense, like I really look at the book as the script of the documentary. I think that like the documentary obviously is super personal and it's me like just rewatching and reliving particular, like trying to convey some kind of like atmosphere and aesthetic throughout this 47-minute experience, as it is today. Whereas with the book, you can really jump around, you don't have to experience it in a linear way. You could go from one chapter to another or whatever, how, or not, you could just read one chapter and that would be all of it, So Whereas with the documentary, I noticed, for the most part, if people start it, they finish it. And, that feels good to know that they actually are compelled to absorb all of that information and watch what you made on screen.
Right. Excellent.
Oh,
Excellent.
Very neat. Well, Michael, I wanted to ask you about what you have coming up down the line right here. But is there anything else that we didn't get to touch on about the exposition? Anything else you'd like to mention, or anything of that sort?
Nothing off the top of my head. I would say, I'm always looking for new stuff. Obviously, I've got another project that deals with national parks. I've got one volume out of that, and will eventually be releasing another volume. It's
awesome.
Technically, it's written. I just don't have the time to organize it and publish it yet. And then I've got my third book, which is actually like a content marketing workbook. It's like a 10 lesson kind of thing, is actually coming out at the end of this month, beginning of September. And that'll have some stuff that kind of drills down into how I do these things in a technical sense. So that's kind of the stuff that I have coming up. Now, in regards to the Columbian Exposition project, I intend to release a second edition of the book, because I want to clean it up a little bit, and correct a couple of errors that are in there, typographical or factual. I don't think there's not really any major factual errors in there. There's just maybe some typo stuff. And I want to add and change some pictures. I might release some more merchandise that's related to the project. And, I have some other cuts of the documentary that I've not released yet. And the thing about that is just, kind of finding the time. And then the last piece of this is that I've begun to develop some of the components to bring this project into extended reality, such as virtual reality or augmented reality.
I know you've mentioned that in previous interviews, so I did want to ask you about that.
So it's coming along. Yes. So
that's awesome.
Right now, 4 components, in development, and we are starting on our 5th. So just building assets, and hopefully, I would love to say that, like, before the end of this year, I'll have something that people can actually spin up on their phone or some kind of device and experience some of what we've done so far. I don't want to make that promise today. Sure. But I really hope that happens. I can say that I have done that, but I can't say that I am convinced with what we have today, and that I want other people to be able to experience that in the way that it stands right now.
Yeah, that was one. I think it was your WGN interview that you did. Was it a couple months ago? And I caught that where you said about the VR and the AR. And I know I teach middle school, so we do ancient civilizations and in some of the apps that are out there. Through Google, being able to show the kids, hey, this is what the Colosseum looks like right now, and this is what it looked like, back in the day when ancient Rome was at its peak, and being able to use that AR where they can turn their tablet or their iPad and kind of see, full 360 motion, what it looks like. And then also taking it a step further with some VR stuff. I mean, I can't even imagine how fun that would be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
the VR component looks great for this very walled garden storytelling narrative aspect. The augmented reality kind of leg of things looks really, really great for exploration.
Sure.
And just gauging the massiveness. I mean, I can tell you, like, I've had my phone, and like, we have one of our structures, and when I'm walking along the edge of this thing, because it is 1-to-1 scale, so it stands 60 feet high.
Wow.
And I'm walking along the distance of this thing. You are literally walking the distance of this and looking at it. And it's like animated and does some stuff. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I always joke with my kids that my job is to trick them into learning by having fun. And when you can kind of engage with, I mean, I can't imagine how many kids go home and play either their PSVR or their Oculus or their, gosh, what else? I don't know what other VR headset I'm missing right now, but you kind of tap into that. That's just it's an excellent thing to tap into. So that's awesome. That's a great thing to be striving towards. So best of luck with that. Yeah. I mean, just in general, again, thank you so much for coming on. Greg, is there anything else you want?
Yeah, Michael, this podcast, we are still baseball first and foremost. So I know you're a Sox fan, so I got to ask you, how you feeling about the Chicago White Sox so far this season?
I feel good. I wish I had more time to watch, obviously. But at the same time, I was looking at them early in the season, keeping up a little bit right now as we're getting like halfway through here, and no complaints. I'm happy with it. I think that you're getting into the point of the season where you have to really focus, and if you want to be in the playoffs, then you have to maintain. And this is the harder half of the season. I would say that the first half of the season, it's always nice to be in this position. If they can maintain it, then it'll remain exciting.
Yeah.
100% agree with you, my friend.
Well, again, if you want to get a hold of Michael, he's got his own email, or I'm sorry, not email. He's got his own website where you can pretty much find all of his links, all of his contact information. That is www.michael-finney, FINNEY.com. You can also follow Michael on Twitter at MDF_365. And then you can also follow the Columbian Exposition Project's Twitter account as well, which is Chicago_1893. In terms of if you are interested in picking up the book, it is easily found on Amazon. I highly recommend it. It is called The 1893 Chicago's Columbian Exposition, Arts and Culture on the Doorstep of the 20th Century. You can get that on your Kindle if you have an e-reader, or you can get it through paperback. I know that's always my preferred way. I think I'm like a dinosaur. I like to have something tangible in my hands.
I recommend it.
Physical copy.
Yep. Physical copy. Yeah.
You can look at the pictures.
Exactly.
If you want to.
There's something to be said, not having to, scroll around on the touchscreen. And then also the documentary, you can either choose to rent it or purchase it on Amazon. And that is called the 1893 Chicago's Columbian Exposition documentary. Highly recommend it. Michael, again, thank you so much for reaching out. Thanks for coming on. And, again, is there anything else that before we call it a night, anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
No, thanks for having me on. You guys produce a great show. Appreciate
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. No, hey, we appreciate it. We're so used to doing baseball and, ranking our top 5 TV shows. This was such a nice, I feel like I'm back in school. You raised the IQ of the show a little bit. So thank you very much.
Very much so. I mean, we've expanded our content here on the show for the better. We're better people because of it. And we owe that to you, Michael. So thanks again.
Well, if I can, thank you. And if I can, spend a little more time watching baseball for the rest of the season, but I can pop in and actually talk some shop with anytime goes on.
Of course, anytime. Well, again, that's Michael Finney. You can find him again at Michael-Finney, FINNEY.com, and you can find all his contact information and links to the book and the documentary and his various projects. And as always, we are Baseball and Whatever. If you have questions about the documentary, about anything you'd like to ask us that we can share with Michael, feel free to email us at baseballandwhatever@gmail.com. Tweet us at baseballandwhat, and we are also on Facebook at facebook.com/baseballandwhatever. So thanks again to Michael. Greg, thanks again for hopping on and joining us, and we hope everybody has a great night. We will see you guys next time. Take care.
Take care, everyone.